stop resisting. Who are you really? Who gave you that uniform?
I am Staff Sergeant Darien Ralston.
Shut up! You think
Arms
flying
not
in from
coming
Iran
through.
makes you legit? Who sent you?
Arms not coming
Because he's
through.
stalling. Think I'm stupid? You're not intel, you're a threat.
You're making a mistake.
Yeah? Then why?
On a cold morning at Pittsburgh International Airport, a local police officer was assigned a simple task: escort a U.S. soldier evacuated from Iran safely to the Pentagon. By nightfall, that same officer would be under federal investigation, facing charges that could end his career and put him behind bars for 15 years. What went wrong wasn't a paperwork mistake, it wasn't a security breach. It was bias, and it unfolded inside a secured terminal. Before we get into it, if you care about real stories involving abuse of authority and federal accountability, subscribe now. These cases matter, and this one almost never made headlines. The assignment briefing lasted less than 5 minutes. Officer Merritt Coyle stood inside the airport's restricted operations office while a supervisor slid a sealed folder across the desk. "Escort only," the supervisor said. "No delays, no questioning. Direct transport to D.C. Vehicles staged outside." Coyle skimmed the file. Classified evacuee, recently extracted from Iran. Pentagon transfer priority. He nodded once. Understood. Minutes later, a military charter rolled to a stop on a secured section of the runway. Coyle waited near the controlled access corridor that led into the terminal. 2 TSA supervisors stood at a distance. Airport Operations Manager Marla Ivers monitored radio traffic nearby. The aircraft door opened. Passengers began stepping down. Then Staff Sergeant Darien Ralston appeared at the top of the stairs. 32 years old, U.S. Army intelligence specialist, multiple overseas deployments, fluent in Farsi. Extracted 48 hours earlier during a coordinated evacuation operation tied to sensitive intelligence gathering inside Iran. According to the file, he was considered a high-value asset due to time-sensitive debrief material he carried. He descended calmly, carrying a government-issued duffel. Coyle watched him approach. There was a pause, small but visible. Coyle looked back down at the name in the folder, looked up again. "You're Ralston?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Darien replied evenly, presenting his military identification. Coyle didn't take it immediately. He studied Darien's face first. "You're the asset they flew out?" "Yes." Coyle finally grabbed the ID, but didn't glance at it right away. "How long you been in the Army?" 14 years. "Doing what exactly?" "Intelligence." Coyle gave a short, dry laugh. "Intelligence," he repeated, like the word didn't fit. Marla Ivers stepped closer. "Officer Coyle, transport is ready whenever—" "I've got it," Coyle cut in, eyes still locked on Darien. He flipped open the ID now, scanning it longer than necessary. "You expect me to believe they pulled you out of Iran for this?" Darien didn't react. "I'm under orders to report directly to the Pentagon," he said calmly. Coyle stepped closer, lowering his voice but not his hostility. "Orders don't mean much if the person holding them isn't who they claim to be." The air shifted. TSA agents stopped talking. Coyle keyed his radio. "Dispatch, I need verification on a possible impersonation." Darien's expression didn't change, but backup units were already being notified, and the escort had just turned into something else. Backup units were already being notified. Officer Merritt Coyle didn't lower his radio. "Dispatch, I'm holding a subject claiming to be a U.S. Army Staff Sergeant. Possible impersonation. Requesting secondary verification and additional units to secure." The word impersonation carried across the corridor. TSA agents stopped scanning badges. 2 airport employees looked over. Staff Sergeant Darien Ralston stood still, hands visible at his sides. "There's no impersonation," Darien said calmly. "You have my identification, you have the escort order." Coyle ignored that. "How'd you get on that aircraft?" "It was arranged through Department of Defense channels." Who arranged it? I'm not authorized to discuss operational details. Coyle smirked. Convenient. He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it personal. You expect me to believe you were running operations in Iran? Darien met his eyes. Yes. Coyle shook his head slowly. No, I don't. Two marked airport police vehicles pulled into the restricted access bay. Officer Tate Holloway stepped out first, hand resting near his holster as he approached. What's the situation? Holloway asked. Coyle didn't hesitate. Subject claims he's military intel. Story's not adding up. Darien spoke evenly. Officer, I was evacuated under direct authorization. I am to be transported to the Pentagon immediately. Coyle turned slightly toward Holloway, but kept his voice loud enough for nearby staff to hear. See, that's the problem. He keeps saying Pentagon like that makes it real. Marla Ivers stepped forward again. Officer Coyle, the transport order came through verified federal channels. We confirmed it. Coyle shot her a look. With respect, ma'am, federal channels get compromised. He faced Darien again. Let's talk about Iran. Who are you meeting? I'm not discussing classified information in a public corridor. Because there isn't any, Coyle snapped. Holloway shifted his stance. You want him cuffed? Coyle didn't answer right away. He studied Darien again. Uniform pressed, posture steady, expression controlled. You don't look like someone they send overseas for intelligence extraction, Coyle said flatly. The implication hung in the air. Darien didn't respond to the implication. Instead, he repeated, I am under direct orders. Coyle keyed his radio again. Dispatch, elevate this. Possible internal security threat. I want federal confirmation before this individual goes anywhere. That wording changed everything. Internal security threat. Airport chatter quieted. A TSA supervisor stepped back toward a glass partition. Darien finally spoke with firmer tone. Officer Coyle, you were assigned to escort me, not interrogate me. Coyle's jaw tightened. Assignment's on hold until I'm satisfied. He stepped behind Darien suddenly. Hands behind your back. The corridor froze. Holloway moved in without hesitation. Darien remained still. Officer, you are making a mistake. Coyle pulled out his cuffs. Turn around. And this time it wasn't an escort anymore. Turn around. Staff Sergeant Darien Ralston slowly turned, placing his hands behind his back without resistance. Officer Merritt Coyle grabbed his wrists harder than necessary and snapped the cuffs on tight. Metal clicked through the corridor. Several airport employees were now openly watching. One TSA agent quietly stepped farther away, whispering into a shoulder mic. Officer Tate Holloway positioned himself in front of Darien, stance wide, one hand near his holster. You are detaining a U.S. Army intelligence officer under federal transport orders, Darien said evenly. You need to reconsider. Coyle leaned in close to his ear. If you were what you claim to be, I wouldn't be standing here questioning it. He straightened and addressed Holloway loudly. Until verified, we treat this as a potential hostile infiltration. Last thing we need is someone walking off a plane from Iran claiming intel status. The word Iran landed heavy. A nearby airport staff member muttered, "Is this real?" Marla Ivers stepped forward again, clearly unsettled. Officer Coyle, this is escalating beyond protocol. Coyle cut her off. Protocol is exactly what I'm following. He pulled Darien slightly forward, forcing him to walk. Let's move. They escorted him toward a secured holding room off the terminal corridor. Cameras followed the movement. Every step was recorded. Inside the holding room, Coyle removed the escort folder from under his arm and tossed it onto a metal table. Start talking, he demanded. I've already identified myself, Darien replied. Coyle paced once, then stopped in front of him. You keep saying Pentagon like it's protection. It's not. Not here. He leaned down closer. "You think a uniform erases suspicion?" Darien kept his posture straight despite the cuffs. "You are ignoring verified federal orders." Coyle stepped back and keyed his radio again. "Dispatch, has DOD responded?" Static answered first, then a voice. "Officer Coyle, we're receiving multiple calls from Department of Defense liaisons requesting immediate clarification. They're asking why the escort hasn't departed." Coyle didn't hesitate. "Inform them subject is being detained pending identity confirmation." There was a pause on the line. "Sir, they're stating the subject is a high-value asset." Coyle's face hardened. "Assets get impersonated too." He ended the transmission before the dispatcher could respond further. Across the terminal, unmarked black SUVs were pulling into a restricted federal access lane. Inside the holding room, Darien finally spoke again. "You're about to create a situation that goes beyond airport jurisdiction." Coyle stepped closer. "Or I just stopped one." A knock hit the metal door. Hard, controlled, official. Officer Holloway looked at Coyle. "Federal vehicles just arrived." Coyle didn't move immediately. Then the door opened, and the energy in the room changed. The door opened without urgency, but with control. Two men in dark suits stepped inside first. No raised voices, no visible weapons drawn, just credentials held at chest level. Behind them stood Director Hollis Bramwell. He didn't rush in. He assessed the room in one sweep. Darien in cuffs, Officer Merritt Coyle standing squared up, Officer Tate Holloway near the wall. "Who's in charge here?" Bramwell asked calmly. Coyle stepped forward. "I am. Officer Merritt Coyle, Airport Police. This individual is being detained pending identity verification." Bramwell's eyes shifted to Darien. "Staff Sergeant Darien Ralston," he said evenly. "Army Intelligence." Darien nodded once. "Yes, sir." Bramwell looked back at Coyle. "Remove the restraints." Coyle didn't move. "With respect, sir, I'm not releasing anyone until I confirm he is who he claims to be. He arrived from Iran. That alone," Bramwell interrupted, voice still level, "is exactly why he is not your detainee." Silence filled the room. Coyle kept his posture rigid. "Sir, impersonation of military personnel is not uncommon. I have an obligation to secure the airport." Bramwell stepped closer, not raising his voice. "You were given a direct escort order, clearance tier 7. That doesn't come through civilian channels without authentication." He gestured slightly toward Darien. "This soldier was extracted 48 hours ago under Department of Defense authority. He carries time-sensitive intelligence tied to Iranian regional operations. Your assignment was protection and transport." Coyle's jaw tightened. "And I chose to verify." "You chose," Bramwell corrected, "to accuse a cleared intelligence operative of impersonation and terrorism without probable cause." The word terrorism sat in the room like a charge. Holloway shifted uncomfortably. Coyle tried again. "Sir, I identified inconsistencies." "You identified nothing," Bramwell said flatly. "You saw a soldier step off that aircraft and decided he didn't fit your expectation." The statement was direct. Coyle didn't respond. One of the federal agents stepped forward. "We need the body cam footage, immediately." Coyle hesitated half a second too long. "That's evidence now," the agent added. Bramwell's eyes never left Coyle. "Remove the cuffs." Slowly, Coyle reached forward and unlocked them. The metal clicked open. Darien brought his hands forward but didn't rub his wrists. He stood straight. Bramwell turned to him. "Transportation is ready. We're late." "Yes, sir," Darien replied. As they moved toward the door, Bramwell paused beside Coyle. "You were assigned to protect a national asset. Instead, you compromised a federal operation." Coyle held his ground, but the authority in the room was no longer his. Outside, airport personnel watched as Darien was escorted past them again, this time flanked by federal officials, not local police. Behind them, another agent stepped inside the holding room. "Officer Coyle, you're being relieved pending review." Coyle stared back. Relieved from what? The agent met his eyes. From duty. And that was just the beginning. Officer Merritt Coyle didn't argue when the words landed. He handed over his radio first, then his badge. Officer Tate Holloway stood a few feet away, silent, watching federal agents collect Coyle's body camera and log it into an evidence bag. Within an hour, Pittsburgh International Airport Police Command was in emergency session. Marla Ivers provided written confirmation of the original escort order. TSA supervisors submitted statements. Dispatch audio was preserved. By late afternoon, the Department of Defense had formally documented the delay. Staff Sergeant Darien Ralston was already en route to Washington under federal protection, delivering intelligence that officials later described as time-sensitive and operationally critical. Back in Pittsburgh, the focus shifted entirely. Director Hollis Bramwell contacted the Department of Justice directly. The language used by Coyle over open radio, possible hostile infiltration and internal security threat, triggered automatic federal review protocols. Those terms were not neutral. They carried operational consequences. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rowan Halberd was assigned to assess potential civil rights violations and federal obstruction. The first issue, Coyle had been given a verified escort directive with authentication clearance attached. He overrode it. The second, he publicly accused a U.S. soldier of impersonation and terrorism without evidence. The third, he detained him despite confirmed Department of Defense intervention. Body cam footage was reviewed that night. In the video, Coyle's tone was consistent, dismissive, confrontational, escalating. At one point he stated, "You don't look like someone they send overseas for intelligence extraction." That line was flagged immediately. Investigators also noted that Coyle never raised similar concerns about the other evacuees who exited the aircraft before Darien Ralston. Internal Affairs pulled Coyle's personnel file. 2 prior complaints surfaced. Both involved allegations of biased conduct during security stops. Neither had resulted in formal discipline. Both had been categorized as insufficient evidence. This time, there was video. The following morning, Coyle was formally placed on administrative suspension pending criminal review. Holloway was interviewed but not charged. Footage confirmed he acted under Coyle's direction without initiating escalation. By the end of the week, the U.S. Attorney's Office filed preliminary notice of intent to present the case to a federal grand jury. The potential charges included deprivation of rights under color of law, false arrest, obstruction of a federal operation. Maximum combined exposure, 15 years. Outside the courthouse, reporters began asking questions about airport oversight and federal coordination breakdowns. Inside, Rowan Halberd prepared the indictment package. The footage would speak for itself, and once it was presented to a grand jury, Officer Merritt Coyle would no longer control the narrative. The federal courtroom in Pittsburgh was quiet when the body cam footage played. Officer Merritt Coyle sat at the defense table, no uniform, no badge. Across the room, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rowan Halberd stood beside a monitor as the jury watched the recording from the airport holding room. The audio was clear. "You don't look like someone they send overseas for intelligence extraction." Then, possible hostile infiltration. Then, the cuffs. Jurors didn't react outwardly, but several took notes when the footage showed Director Hollis Bramwell ordering the restraints removed and correcting Coyle's authority on record. The prosecution's argument was direct. Coyle had been given a verified federal escort order. He ignored it. He escalated without probable cause. He publicly accused a U.S. Army intelligence specialist of terrorism and impersonation. He detained him after confirmation from the Department of Defense. The defense argued caution. They claimed Coyle was acting in the interest of airport security. Halberd responded with timestamps. There was no evolving threat, he told the jury. There was an evolving assumption. Staff Sergeant Darien Ralston testified briefly. He did not dramatize the incident. "I was following transport orders," he said. "My responsibility was to deliver intelligence to the Pentagon. The delay created operational risk." He was asked if he resisted. No. If he raised his voice? No. If he gave any false information? No. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. Guilty on federal civil rights violations. Guilty on false arrest. Guilty on obstruction tied to interference with the Department of Defense operation. At sentencing, the judge addressed Coyle directly. "You were assigned to protect a soldier serving this country. Instead, you used your authority to question his legitimacy without evidence. Authority requires discipline. You exercised neither." Coyle was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, followed by supervised release. Outside the courthouse, Darien Ralston declined extended media comment. "I did my job, that's all." He returned to duty within weeks. The case triggered mandatory bias review protocols for airport police departments working alongside federal agencies. Escort procedures were revised. Radio language policies were updated. What began as a routine protection assignment became a federal conviction because one officer allowed personal bias to override clear orders. If you care about real cases where abuse of authority meets accountability, make sure you subscribe. These stories don't always reach the headlines, but they matter. And the next one might be even closer than you think.